How's it going today, guys? In today's episode, I'm going to continue where I left off with my conversation with ChatGPT about the pioneer farmers in eastern Washington and just different hypothetical, futuristic situations and scenarios. And just so you're not completely lost, if you go back and watch my video that's titled What Happens When Prophet Dies, a hypothetical scenario, it can get you caught up to where we are now. And this episode is entitled When Prophet Dies and Power Replaces It, a hypothetical scenario. I don't think anyone in this country truly understood what was happening the moment profit stopped being the goal. The headlines still praised AgriCorp's efficiency. Politicians still stood in front of grain silos, shaking hands and promising abundance for all. News hosts still smiled as they read from their teleprompters about record-breaking production. Nobody asked the only question that mattered. If wheat is too cheap to be profitable, why keep growing so much of it? It didn't make sense on the surface, not if the purpose of the system was commerce. But that's the thing we all missed. The purpose had changed. The day the market flatlined. It happened quietly. There were no sirens, there were no announcements, just numbers on a screen slipping into the red. Commodity markets hit what analysts called the efficiency wall. Too much wheat and too few buyers. In cities, wages stagnated and rent soared. Debt smothered families like weeds choking a crop. People stopped buying the things that kept the economy alive, like cars and electronics and new homes and luxury foods. Even cheap bread began to feel like a burden to many. The economists tried to warn us, you can't fire the customer. But AgriCorp didn't care. Because by then, we weren't customers, we were part of the crop. Food became a weapon before we even knew it. The first transition happened through ration cards. They disguised them as temporary relief measures, a way to ensure everyone got affordable food during a market slump. But the moment you create a system that says you get to eat if we say you do, profit is no longer the point. Access to the food becomes the product, and obedience becomes the currency. The free market didn't die with a crash. It was smothered with loving hands, while the public smiled and thanked the killer. Why AgriCorp didn't panic? Most companies would have collapsed, but AgriCorp wasn't most companies. It wasn't even a company anymore. It had become a governing structure. It didn't need customers anymore because it had subjects. It didn't need competition. It had monopoly by design. And it didn't need profit. It had government subsidy pipelines. When farmers failed, AgriCorp bought their land. When grain prices fell, AgriCorp bought influence instead. The power became self-sustaining. Money was replaced with land control, food control, and population control. And once those three align, there's nothing left to compete with. The return of an old idea. History used to speak of something called the moral economy of the peasant. And it meant that people will tolerate hardship so long as the basics of survival feel fair. AgriCorp inverted that, and it created a new moral economy. Survival is a privilege granted only to those who comply. We learn the rules quickly. A quiet family gets their ration filled. A loud one gets a warning. A rebellious one gets relocated. Profit didn't matter anymore. Behavior did. Why power replaced profit? Profit relies on consent, and power relies on control. Profit needs a thriving population with spending money. Power needs only enough bodies to serve its goals. Profit is fragile, but power is durable. AgriCorp realized that food doesn't just feed people, it defines them. Bread becomes the leash, the chain, and the collar. And once you remove the belief that people are customers, you can redefine them as something else entirely. A resource. Controlling the future by controlling hunger. People think power comes from guns, votes, and money, but they're wrong. Power comes from dependency. We need food every day, and that's the vulnerability. That's the pressure point. And AgriCorp exploited it perfectly. Some industrial giants hoard wealth, and others hoard information. But AgriCorp, it hoarded appetite. In doing so, it made sure every stomach was a bargaining chip. You want the human race under control? Forget stormtroopers and laws and surveillance. Control the bread, and everything else will follow naturally. The collapse that wasn't a collapse. Normal collapses look like empty shelves, riots, and starvation, but we never reached that point. AgriCorp prevented the old world from dying too fast. Instead, it replaced it slowly. We didn't lose the economy in a single moment. We simply woke up one morning and realized we no longer lived in an economy at all. We lived inside of a system, a machine, a farm. What power wants and what profit never could. Profit seeks to grow the pie. Power seeks to ration it. Profit needs humans as consumers. Power needs humans as assets. Profit depends on liberty. Power depends on limiting it. And once the market died, AgriCorp didn't try to revive it. It celebrated. Because finally, no more messy markets, no more shifting prices, no more unpredictable demand. Just a streamlined human supply chain. If you can't sell the wheat, sell the right to eat it. AgriCorp discovered a truth far darker than any spreadsheet. People will work harder for food they can't afford than for food they can. Profit had reached its limit, and control had no limit. And so the transformation was complete. The food became the governance. Every system eventually reveals its nature. At first, the shift was invisible. Our rations were still delivered, our fields still operated, and our nights were still quiet. But then came curfews, unemployment, employment assignments, relocation notices, and then the drones. Each step justified by one phrase: to ensure access to essential nutrition. They weaponized compassion, and they turned survival into a loyalty test. And we, the hungry, scared, tired, failed to recognize the war being fought. A war not for territory and not for resources, but for humankind's definition. Power's true commodity. AgriCorp didn't want money anymore. It wanted certainty. It wanted predictable output, behavior, movement, reproduction, and obedience. And profit never guaranteed those things. But hunger does. It always has, and it always will. We used to believe dystopia would arrive with boots smashing down doors, but instead it came as food subsidies and agricultural innovation and public-private partnership. A promise that no one would go hungry again. A dream so comforting we never noticed the cage forming around it. And now, we're not starving. We're something worse. We're being fed only because we're easier to manage alive.